Just waiting for Councillor Barber. Councillor Lawson. Oh, here she is. Yes, Councillor Barber. Okay, that's it. Okay, well, tēnā koutou katoa, ahi ahi Māori e. Welcome everybody, no mai haere mai, to our council meeting today. Warm welcome to our team over there. Great to have you, and thank you for your papers and the agenda that we have in front of us. Could I invite Dr. James Graham now to start us with a karakia, as we don't have a minister today. And our waiata will be tūtena mai.
Kia ora, your worship, koutou katoa ngā kai kaunihira, me tātou ngā kai mahi o te kaunihira aroe o ere taunga, me koutou anō kei te hapori e mātakitaki mai nā, hei tēnei ahi no reira. Kia unui tātou, he honora he kororia ki te atua, he mau ngā rongo ki te matua o te whenua, he whakaaro pai ki tēnā o mātou, o te kāinga whānui o here taunga, hanga e te atua he ngā kauhau ki roto ki tēnā o mātou, whakatongia mai tō wairua, e pā hei awhina hei tohutoi a mātou, me te mea ai hoki ko ngā kai kaunihira kei te tēpū nei, o here taunga, me mātua anō ngā kai mahi o te kaunihira, kia piki ake mātou katoa te hapuri whānui, te kāinga o here taunga, ki te taro o te ora, ake, amine.
Amine. Kia ora. Apologies and leave of absence. We have apologies today from Councillor O'Keefe, Councillor Oddie and Councillor Harvey, and apologies for lateness from Councillor Kerr. Any leave of absence? Councillor Watkins, Councillor Lawson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Could I have leave of absence September 19 and 20, please?
Oh, that's a special day. Yes. Blossom Day. Yeah. Awesome. Councillor Lawson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Can I please have leave of absence from the 26th of July to the 30th of July?
Thank you. Happy to move from the chair. Could I have a second to please Councillor Dixon? All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? Thank you. That's carried. Just remind councillors to declare conflicts of interest as they may arise at the appropriate time. Confirmation of minutes of the council meeting held on the 24th of June 2021, moved by Councillor Travis, seconded by Councillor Watkins. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? Thank you, that's carried. Now, item number 5, welcome to Ashley and Richard. This is the special day. Resolution to set the rates, item number 5. Lots and lots of work gone into those calculations. Welcome, Ashley.
So the Council has adopted its long-term plan, on the 24th of June, which included a 6.9% average increase for the financial year 2021-22. The rates team and Richard have finalised the rating database, so we're here today to ask you to strike rates for the forthcoming financial year. Hopefully you've read the report, which outlines our rates for the year, which we hope you adopt today. Any questions?
Thank you, Ashley. Any questions, councillors? Councillor Sholin?
Thank you, Your Worship. I find myself asking a question that I ask every year, but I'm going to ask it again. I note within the recommendations that we have listed the penalty dates for those who don't pay their rates on time. I'm just wondering, what is it that we do to notify those who may have overlooked paying their rates before a penalty is applied? Do we have any mechanisms there?
So the rates notice itself has on there the instalment due dates, and it says that if you don't pay by this date, there will be a penalty. The penalty is applied 2 days after the due date, so there isn't a lot of time. So if we do apply a penalty, we then write to everyone, and which gives them the opportunity to write back to say if there's any reason why they haven't paid, and there are remission policies around remitting penalties under certain circumstances.
Thank you. A follow-up question, if I may. I understand that we have somewhere in the vicinity of 3,000 of our ratepayers have now signed up to receive their rates via email. Does that sound roughly correct, or is that a different database that I'm thinking of?
It's slightly more than that. We are moving to, we've got a new supplier for our printing of rates notices, and part of that will also be a portal where ratepayers can sign up to actually receive their notices by email and view and reprint their own rates notices without coming to us. So I'm in the throes at the moment of sorting out the advertising for that. It's three simple clicks that they can go on and register, so the rates notice will have information about how to sign up for that.
The reason why I ask is that I'm really interested to know, and it can be future, the thing that comes back to us potentially is around how we can better assist our ratepayers and not incurring a penalty. I do understand we send out a clear notice initially, but most businesses will send out a statement and a follow-up and give you a bit of a chance before they impose penalties. And given the extraordinary times we find ourselves in, I'm keen to look at ways to work with our ratepayers rather than against them.
We do also sort of, I guess, increase our profile in terms of radio broadcasting to alert those ratepayers that they are due on the sort of around that 20th of the month. There's sort of a week build-up where we're continuously promoting the need to pay.
Bruce, did you want to add anything?
Through your worship, no, Ashley just covered it off just
Okay.
now. The point I was going to raise, we do have a radio sort of campaign in the last week, but it's probably something we can have another conversation with our marketing and comms team as well around, what sort of social media sort of presence we can do to increase that. But we generally have a strong participation in rates payments and on time, so it does tend to work quite well.
Sorry, and just following on from that as well, we have quite a high percentage on direct debits. So if you're on a direct debit, you don't get the penalty anyway. So
Thank you.
We're on our direct debits now.
it's around 58-59%, which is that's quite
that's
good.
great.
Yeah,
That's
that's
good,
quite
yeah.
good compared to a lot of councils. And what we're hoping with this new portal is that's going to increase that.
Some more, yes,
as well,
wonderful.
so.
Great, thank you. Councillor Barber?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just on page 11, bottom of page 11, might be the top of page 12 actually, just around the targeted water rate. So that 0.83 cents per cubic metre, is that over and above normal consumption? Because you know a lot of properties fall in that one was it 1,500 square metre size. Yeah, I'm just trying to get a feel of the extent of what we're talking about here. Yeah, so I've got another question after that too. Thank you.
So the 83 cents per cubic metre is to extraordinary users. So this will typically include mostly commercial properties. We do have a few sort of larger properties, residential properties around the Havelock Hills area. We are sort of increasing our sort of rollout of metered users, so it won't include all large properties over 1,500 square metres. We do provide them with an allowance, so by charging that $480, they are provided with 1,000 litres per day, so 365 cubic metres a year. The 83 cents is charged on any use over and above that. So like I say, it generally is mainly commercial players. I think there's around about 1,000 properties in total that are connected. So it's commercial, schools, and also some larger residential properties.
Can I just follow up to that?
Yes.
So just in terms, so you see, are we currently looking to extend that to, you know, property throughout the district? You've got 1,000 at the moment. I mean, it could include.
Through your worship, not at the current position. That would be a decision for council if it was to change its rating revenue approach to drinking water. At the moment, the majority of all of our residential properties are all on a per property charge. These are just those outside of the normal zones or outside of the normal residential. So it does pick up those rural fringes as Ashley talked about in those commercial properties. So that would be a decision of council to change their approach.
Yeah, you know, I'm just thinking about we've got a lot of public kainga that have been built that probably come under that. Well, they definitely come under that square meterage, and I am assuming would be kind of caught up in that policy under the current policy. Question there.
Through your worship, I'd need to check how many public kainga. A lot of them are. Some are coming off a municipal supply, and some are off a self-supply. I'd need to work with the team just to see how many it covers.
Just through your worship, just in terms of rates on Māori land, I know that government did put through a policy change earlier this year. Have we been able to implement that from our point of council end?
Yes, we have. You're right. So the government introduced some changes around the rate of Maori land, really to encourage utilisation and development of Maori land and remove some of those rating financial barriers. We've abided by those rules. We've reviewed all of our Maori land to see and determine whether it's being used or not, and made a call. And we've just moved around about 140 properties from rateable to non-rateable. So any Maori land that's leased or used, got a dwelling on, will still remain rateable. But we've just changed the status of around about 140. And we've got a memo, I think, we're due to circulate, sort of explaining some of the financial impacts to council in terms of obviously they've been removed from the rating base, but also we've had to deal with some of the arrears on those sites. Statistically or historically, a lot of those rates are statute barred, written off after 5 years. Often these blocks of land, no rate payments are made. So I guess in terms of the financial impact on the council, it's more of a one-off write-off as opposed to written off over 5 years. But we have reviewed all our land and made those non-rateable from the 1st of July.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Councillor Barber. Councillor Redstone.
Thank you, Worship. Just wondering about the targeted refuse rate, and I know we have a proposal for a rebate over the next 12 months if people have their rubbish collected less than 26 times. Just wondering how we're going to rebate them that money, whether it's in a form of a discount next year, and also whether we're going to educate them by way of our first rates demand going out.
So we are currently working through that rebate as we speak. So as part of the long-term plan, you did adopt a change to your rate remission policy, which enables us to pass on a rate remission in respect of refuge where they've been recovered or picked up less than 27 times. So we're working through the statistics that we've been provided by our supplier in terms of pickup data. At this stage, we believe there are around about 8,000 properties that will qualify. So we're in the process of putting that remission onto their rate account. So that will go directly onto their rate account, and we'll be encouraging any landlords to pass that on to tenants. We've got a leaflet that will be going out very shortly, sort of promoting, I guess, the past statistics, and also trying to encourage people going forward to use less waste.
Thank you. Councillor Watkins?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a question to the officers. In this agenda item, could you please just point to where the percentage rise for this year is mentioned for DRA 1 and 2?
So I do apologise. In terms of the report, it's not listed in terms of the percentage increase. I guess the long-term plan contained that data, which was a 7.9% average increase, which was a 7.2% RA1, 6.8% RA2, and that was adopted as part of your long-term plan on the 24th of June.
I just wonder, Your Worship, whether in the recommendations we could just have those rate increases for DRA 1 and 2.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Watkins. I have just talked to the Chief Executive about that earlier. And so if we just have giving effect to, what was signed off in the LTP with those breakdowns, happy to have that included. Would you like to move those recommendations? Yes, thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor Redstone, second. So just as the team are just writing up that recommendation C, can I just take this time, because it's a huge journey to get to where we strike the rates. And when you think of last year, as we came out of COVID, our rate rise was 1.9, and this year an average of 6.9. And if I can reflect on the year that has gone and the amount of capital works, quite in a circa of $90 million. So, and then what we have planned in our annual plan in the first year of the LTP is around 107 million. So that's new capital works, new capital expenditure. So, this is we're on a really, really steep work frame here for our team to deliver this big infrastructure plan. But it's when you think of what we achieved, circa of 90 million last year, 107. Let's see if we get there. But this is the time that we reflect on trying to keep our rates affordable, and having a very strict process through the LTP of not too many nice to haves, just get on and deliver the infrastructure that our community has asked for, and round rural roads, and our three water infrastructure, and our urban roads, and keep delivering for our community, particularly around, we heard around waste and around environmental improvement. So well done to the team. It's a big, when we strike the rates, it's a big day, and I congratulate all the work that has gone through the LTP process to get to where we are. And when we look at it as an average, so it's not going to be the same for everyone, we know that.
Sorry, through your worship. So just for clarification, the rating resolutions are very prescriptive, and,
yes.
and it's very important that council has a legally compliant rates resolution. So what we propose to do is insert a new B with these words, and then what was B becomes C, and continues on with the more formal rates resolution.
Okay. Yeah, mover and second, are you comfortable with that requirement? All right, no further questions or comments? I'll put those recommendations. All those in favour, please say aye. Any against? Thank you, that's carried. Item number 6, final adoption of the bylaw dog policy. Welcome, John.
Simply take it that the report's been read, and if there are any questions?
Councillors, any questions? Councillor Nixon?
Thank you, Your Worship. Does this also go into the skateboarding area? Because you've got some.
Yes, the skateboarding bylaw.
Read the whole thing, you just continue. I just wondered, with the prohibited areas for skateboards, I'm not quite sure, they're obviously the business areas. What penalties might apply to somebody that does ride in those areas?
Through Your Worship, most of the penalties under the bylaws are actually have to be taken by summary prosecution, and generally that's a little bit sort of over the top because it's a fine not exceeding $20,000. So, but in terms of enforcement, it's probably more a self-regulatory one. Police are the only ones that can operate it in terms of physically taking a skateboard off someone.
Do we also have signage there? I have seen the odd sign, but are they all adequately signposted?
Yes, there's a number of signs around. They've probably got to the stage in the Hawke's Bay Sun where they've faded a wee bit, and they might need, we can easily do a stock take on those.
I think that would be useful.
Thank you, Councillor Nixon. Councillor Lawson?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a couple of questions around dogs policy. I know during the consultation process there was a concern by a submitter regarding off-leash areas in Havelock North in our reserves. I'm just wondering if that has become a question in regards to the review of the reserve management plan. And also, secondly, I'm just interested in light of dog feces being a major contaminant of our Karamu stream, what enforcement is there around owners having to pick up dog feces?
In answer to the first question, that was definitely passed on to the reserves team who are reviewing the district-wide reserve management plan. In regards to the dog fouling, again, that's one that's quite a self-regulatory one. A lot of people, when they're taking their dogs for a walk that do the right thing, tell people that don't do the right thing that they should be. And generally, if we action complaints, however, complaints are very, very few in regards to dogs fouling and people not picking up, possibly 5 a year out of the 3,500 complaints that we get. So it's not a very popular topic in terms of people complaining.
Thank you. Councillor Lawson, we can think about, more enforcement around that in the future. So, thank you. Councillor Corbin.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think my question is very similar to Councillor Lawson's first question. There was discussion about having a park in Havelock North which had dogs on a leash only, not free roaming. Has that been included in these bylaws that we're discussing today?
No, the discussion was about having a dog prohibited reserve, I believe, and the only way to do that was through a reserve management plan. So we have quite a mixture of on and off leash in different reserves throughout the district.
So currently, while we're discussing a dog prohibited area, dogs are allowed off leash in all parks in Havelock North, according to this.
No, that's not correct. There are some areas where they're required to be on a leash.
Okay, thank you.
Explain which ones are allowed off leash. I think it's the Tainui Reserve. There's a couple that are allowed off leash. Is that right?
There's parts of Kairanga, I think.
Yes.
And Tainui, I think.
And Tainui. All off, yes.
Yeah.
So it's Tainui is all off and parts of Kironga.
Yeah. And they're also prohibited from sports fields, playing fields, and children's play areas.
So I'm not clear on which ones are leash only.
I'll take another question and John, you'll come back to us. Leash only, which parks in Havelock North is your question? Yes, okay, thank you. Councillor Barber, I'll come back to you, Alan.
Yeah, just, through you, the chair, just a question around the dog prohibitive areas. I see, Rangaika beaches on there and, well, Cape Kidnappers, but, is that, I was just trying to look for it in the policy, but is that around the sanctuary? Is that to
That's
protect
correct, yes.
Okay, yep. Oh, makes sense. Yep.
Oh, Councillor Dixon?
Yeah, thank you, Worship. I may be able to help Mr Payne. Palm Brook is on leash or off leash, both, and so is Arataki Reserve, but the Village Green is definitely on leash. Okay?
Okay, so Mr Smith's just going to give us the full rundown of Havelock areas. Page 70. So if everyone likes to have a look at the attachments on page 70 in the attachments book.
So page 30 through to 31 is all the areas where they're off leash.
Okay, so everyone's got that? Page 30, 31. Dog exercise areas. All right, are you comfortable with that, Councillor Corbyn?
Just a final question on this. So the reserve that is going to be considered in the district plan for excluding dogs, is that currently on leash or off leash? And the reason I ask is because if we're moving in that direction, it'd be good to make sure that it's on leash at the moment.
Yeah, no, I'll have to raise that with the reserves team to find out and get back to you.
Thank you, Councillor Sholin.
Happy to move the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Sholin. A seconder, please. Councillor Lawson. No further questions or comments? I'll put that recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? Thank you. That's carried. Item number 7, local alcohol policy review. Welcome to Tony and, sorry, I don't know what that is. Sorry? Janine? Welcome, Janine. And for councillors who haven't been part of a local alcohol policy before, this is a very, very complex beast. And there are, how many local alcohol policies do we have in New Zealand, team? Janine?
Around 60.
About 60 policies? Yep.
For those councillors who haven't met Janine Green before, she's our licensing inspector and she worked on the last review. So just she does turn up from time to time, but mainly around alcohol.
Thanks, John. Welcome, team. Did you you want to add anything to your report?
Yeah, we've got a very short
you got a presentation.
Yeah,
oh,
just to go
cool.
through.
Excellent.
Bit of a recap and our recommendations.
Wonderful.
That's great. As John's just, I'm Janine Green, Alcohol Licensing Inspector and Project Lead for the local alcohol policy for Hastings and Napier. So we've come to you today in regards to the review and whether it should be done in a 3 or 6 year period. Under the Act, it's currently required you have to complete a review within the 6 year period. However, a resolution was put through during the adoption of the LAP in 2019 that we would come back to full council and let you decide whether you wanted to review in 3 versus 6 years. In order to provide a recommendation to you all today, quite a bit of work has been completed in the background. We've done a lot of research and data which is required under Section 78 of the Act. It's very prescriptive around what we need to look at and what we need to do in regards to a review. We sought legal advice, we looked at other LAP reviews around the country. We've got a stakeholder group that meets every 3 months and we discussed it within our stakeholder group. And we looked at, of course, the risk versus the benefits. So just a recap of what's in our local alcohol policy under the Act. Again, it's quite prescriptive around what we can and can't look at. It is actually very narrow. We can only look at the hours for on, off and club licences. We have currently a location and density provision within our local alcohol policy where no further licences are to be issued for set areas that are low socioeconomic and identified as areas where the risk of alcohol-related harm was very high. Those areas were Flaxmere, Camberley and Maraenui. There is also discretionary conditions and some additional conditions around special licences, and these are things like security or lighting, the number of drinks that can be sold at one time at an event and those sorts of things. So looking back at the research, for the last couple of years, we've not really seen a huge change in alcohol-related harm pre and post the LAP. What we have seen is that we probably need more time to gather data and to examine the data that we do have. We got legal support and opinion, and they suggest that a 6-year review probably would be better with the amount of evidential requirements that are required under the Act. So that was their opinion. Stakeholders, so like I said, we have a quarterly meeting with police, health and inspectors from both Hastings and Napier councils, and we all agree that a 6-year review probably would be the recommended option. The current LAP is fit for purpose, and when we compare it to the other LAPs around the country, we actually do a really great job in regards to the provisions that we do have. Lots of councils didn't manage to get the hours that we have managed to get in regards to restricting off licences and on licences, and we were one of the very few councils that managed to get a restriction on location, so protecting those areas that had high alcohol-related harm issues. The other thing we did need to look at was how many other councils around the country have currently been reviewed. There has only been 5 reviews done around the country, so it's at the moment very difficult to ascertain whether we'd be likely appealed and what we potentially might be appealed on. Some of you may or may not know it was a lengthy appeal process which was very costly for the council. We did end up settling and making a negotiation with the 2 appellants, and that process could likely occur again upon a review. So our recommendation is to review in 6 years, which would mean we'd need to start in October 24. And this is just a real quick overview, just to kind of show you the breadth of research and the amount of work that really needs to go into a review process. It will probably take about a year to do that. So if we were to go for a 3-year review, I would have to start pretty much now to get that done in time. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Janine. Councillor Lawson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just have a question around, look, I'm in agreement with this 6-year review, but I note that, you know, collecting data is really difficult, and it's mentioned in 4.8 here in your report. And in the absence of data, I think that, you know, we'd have a lesser case, particularly around the bottle store restriction areas that we have. So I'm just wondering how we can improve data collection and what agencies, how we can influence agencies to provide that data to us.
Very good question. Thank you, Councillor Lawson.
Really clear. So there is a requirement under the Act in Section 78(4) that both police and health have to provide us with reasonable data. I must say that health data has really improved over the last 2 years. I'm actually impressed with the amount of effort that they've put in to start collecting more alcohol-related data. I have put a request into the National Headquarters for police data, as basically we just don't have any. We've got what they have on their website, which is very minimal and wouldn't meet the requirements, like you say, under the Act, if we were to go through a review.
Thank you. Councillor Nixon.
Yeah, thanks. Just regarding off licence and the hours of operation, which I think are 7 o'clock to 10 for dairies and supermarkets, and 9 to 10 for others. But some, particularly supermarkets and dairies, open beyond those hours. So are they just limited from selling it, or does it have an effect on their ability to display alcohol?
So under the Act, they are not allowed to sell alcohol beyond their licensed hours. So if they were open beyond those hours, they'd have to cordon those areas off. I'm unaware of any actual premises in the regards of licences that are open beyond their licensed hours currently.
Thank you. Councillor Sholin?
Thank you, Worship. My question is around the appeal process that we went through for the current LAP, or LAP. Are we calling it LAP or LAP?
Same thing, yeah.
Okay, great. How long did that process take, and did it stop us from putting in place the current LAP while that appeal process was going underway?
Through the chair. So that process, I think, started in 2012 and it was only adopted in 2019. The appeal process took approximately a year or just over. There was a lot of going back and forth, and it takes a lot of time for the Alcohol Regulatory and Licensing Authority to sit to make the decisions and those sorts of things. And unfortunately, yeah, there is no LAP in place during that time period, no.
Okay. So I guess my follow-up question to that then is, given the length of time that the last LAP review was kind of caught up in this appeal process, and the fact that we've got really well-funded and coordinated parties with a very vested interest who do appeal our LAP reviews, is there a disadvantage to the community in waiting for 6 years? Because if we were to do a 3-year review, albeit that would put huge pressure on staff, and I do understand that, at least then we would have an opportunity to get the new LAP in place without a big lengthy process after a 6-year wait.
Sure, through the chair. So the reason why we had no LAP the first time is because it was the first time the Act had come into play. It was the very first local alcohol policy. So in the situation where we are now, our LAP would continue to be enforced right through until we enacted a new LAP.
Great, thank you for answering that. And my only other question is just a clarification around, I note in the report that it says that reviewing it too regularly could leave the LAP open to having the basic provisions that are currently in the LAP challenged. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. So there is always that that risk if we review in 3 or 6 years that we could lose some of the provisions. We may find that supermarkets or Superliquor or whoever may appeal may have data just to show that we can't support our current provisions. So there is unfortunately always that risk.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. I note licence holders aren't included in the stakeholder group.
Absolutely. They will be as part of the review, they will, yes.
They will be in the future.
Yes, at the moment, the stakeholder group that we currently have that we meet quarterly is literally just to gather health and police data for the review coming up in 3 or 6 years.
So in future, will stakeholders include licensees in the 3 monthly engagement?
So it won't be a 3-monthly engagement. What happens is you go through a full stakeholder engagement process, which includes all licensees, AA, different health and those sorts of stakeholders, social stakeholders. You do a full SCP under the Local Government Act as well, so public have consultation process as well. So it's a very lengthy and quite thorough process, and we do currently have alcohol accord meetings with all of our licensees. As a licensing inspector, we do that every, I think it's 3 times a year we currently do it. So we have a really good relationship with our premises, and I think that's of real benefit for Hastings, is the fact that we have that really good relationship with our licensees.
Yep. It's just when we talk about stakeholders, I would have liked to have seen licensees included in the group.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, kia ora. Our 2 Flaxmere councillors aren't here, but if they were here, I think they would be they'd be asking about the protection of Flaxmere, high risk area. There's been a lot of issues in the past, so whether it's a 3-year review or 6-year review, is there a difference in the potential impact on places like Flaxmere? I mean, I read 4.10. You know, there's no further licenses in those places. I mean,
that's correct.
Just elaborate on that, because you know, whatever we do needs to protect Flaxmere, Camberley, you know, those places that are very prone to these types of establishments.
Through the chair. So the current provision under the LAP is that no further off licences bottle stores are allowed in Flaxmere and those high risk kind of areas. And that would continue right through into a review, and we would look at obviously holding on to that. We want to at least keep the basic provisions that we do have. I think it would be too early for me to kind of comment on any additional provisions or anything else that we may do in the future without going through a proper formal review process.
You satisfied with that, Councillor Barber?
Yeah, I think that, yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Travis?
As has earlier been alluded to, a considerable amount of money is invested in lobbying to preserve the interests of the alcohol industry. And yet we saw last week where similarly an industry had been protected by lobbying around health, and I'm talking about the adding of folates to bread, and yet the government came in and legislated right over the top of those vested interests. Has there been any talk around the traps that a similar thing may happen in the alcohol area? In other words, that the system that we're utilising at the moment might just be unilaterally replaced through stronger interest in public health in general?
Through the chair, we're not aware of anything of such at the moment. There may be some discussions in central government around reviewing the Alcohol Act at some point, as there are some kind of administrative and practical kind of things that aren't working too well within the Act. But anything beyond that, I'm not aware of anything, no.
So I have a mover. Is that you, Councillor Sholin? Did you move that? Oh, sorry. Councillor Lawson, you moved that, and Councillor Dixon, you second? Okay, thank you. Any further comments or discussions? No. Put those recommendations. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. That's carried. Thank you. Thank you very much, Janine. Thank you, Tony. Good luck with the work, in preparation for the next time. Item number 8, this is the Clifton and Tongawa Coastal Hazard Strategy Implementation Funding. Welcome, Mr. Clues. Welcome, Mr. Allen. And the councillors may like to comment.
So, yeah, by way of introduction, Your Worship.
Doreen, I think you are right. There is a private members bill that's just come on to, I'm assuming you're looking at the same kind of news service as I am, that Chloe Schwab intends to put a private members bill forward about minimising alcohol harm. So, yes, you are correct. We weren't aware of it till we just searched it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Shaughnessy. That's very helpful. And right, on to our coastal hazards and our funding model.
Thank you, Worship. And by just way of introduction, I think Council's reasonably familiar with the Coastal Hazards Strategy. It's been in front of you a number of times. And you'll all know the difficulties that we've had of trying to get a determination of roles and responsibilities around the delivery of the Coastal Hazards Strategy, because it's not clearly defined within legislation as to whose role that particularly is. So the three councils engaged Raynor Asher QC, a retired judge, to review the situation that we have, because there's no clear guidance anywhere in the country to establish who would be the logical lead agency for this. Although Hastings District Council has always had a strong view, a consistent view, that Regional Council was best placed to lead that work. And that is where Mr. Asher has landed as well in the recommendations that you'll see in the report. So his key recommendations, and there's 4 of them, are listed in the report under 3.13, and they flow through to the recommendations that are in front of you. You'll see in the report that the Regional Council's Environment Committee has heard this agenda item and moved to recommend it to their full council meeting later this month, and Napier City Council did the same last week as well. So I'm happy to take questions. Mr. Clues is here. He's been involved with the Coastal Hazards Technical Advisory Group from the outset, and we have members of the Joint Working Committee here as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Allen. Councillor Redstone.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm strongly in support of the recommendations. I'd just like to ask one question for clarification. I understand that only the Hastings District Council can invoke managed retreat. Is that right?
There are provisions that can be related to a resource consent, which have trigger points. But some of those trigger points are brought about by the Building Act, and specifically, I think it's sections 73 or 75. I can't remember the actual sections, but some regional councils also have strategies of trigger points, and I don't know legally how they would enforce that. So I'm quite happy to look into that, though.
Thank you. I don't think we've got trigger points under control at the moment. We're still discussing trigger points. So it was more about the advisory committee and what influence it would have, I guess, and making sure that regional council can't just say you're out without us having some sort of an input.
Mr. Clues may be able to add more detail.
How do you going up there?
Okay.
The simple answer is only regional councils can extinguish existing use rights for existing occupation of land. So actually, a regional council has more power in that respect.
Thank you. Well, in light of that, I guess I would definitely support the recommendations as they stand and would happily move them.
Thank you, Councillor Redstone. Councillor Dixon.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Delighted to second these. These recommendations were unanimously agreed to at the joint council meeting, which was great. And so that's why I'm more than happy to second the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Dixon. Councillor Nixon.
Yeah, I just wondered, is there any retrospectivity involved in terms of the walls we built at Clifton and more recently at the East Road, I think it's called? Are we spending money which we then can't recover from the sort of the broader aspect, or is it more targeted than that? Because I couldn't pick it up from the information.
Through you, Madam Chair, I think the existing resource consents have been paid for by council. That was the Clifton one. I think they have a 30-year life, and there's a maintenance requirement that goes with the consent, runs with it. I think the one at the corner of East and Hamawana Road, I think it is a council consented one, and that's to protect those assets in terms of the road and the infrastructure behind. Again, they have a set life because of the conditions put down in the consent. So in terms of being able to pay in those two situations, they are consents held by the council.
So are you telling me that's in addition to the amounts that are spelled out in the table 4 and 5?
Yeah, through your worship. So I think paragraphs 4.12, 4.13 covers that off in a little bit of detail. So there is outstanding debt associated with particularly the Clifton revetment and Cape View Corner as it's being developed as we speak. The intention would be that the debt and the ability to recover the cost of that debt would be passed to the regional council as part of the overall Clifton to Tongaroa strategy implementation.
That answers my question. That was the bit I couldn't work out.
So I have a mover and a seconder. No. Oh, Councillor Barber.
Yeah. Just looking at the table 4.4, 23 million over 10 years, 100% ratepayer. Well, I'm assuming it's 100% ratepayer funded. But I'm looking at the Climate Commission, central government, position on climate change. Have they softened their view? Have they said anything that may bring us some financial support from the government, central government I'm talking about, and supporting the regions to deal with this problem, because it's a big problem and it's a national problem. I think it's regional, but there's some national issues that I think need to be factored into it. And I just don't see that in the numbers, financials anyway.
Yes. Apparently, I had to speak close to the speaker for the public gallery. Something I haven't quite got used to yet. So with the review of the Resource Management Act through the Randerson panel, they talked about a new Natural and Built Environment Act and also a new Spatial Planning Act. They also talked about the need for an act to cover climate change adaptation and managed retreat, particularly in coastal areas, but not just coastal areas. Recognising this is an area of great uncertainty that is challenging communities right around the country, and of course in Hawke's Bay with the committee that we've got, we're at the forefront of that challenge and addressing it. But we are expecting something of a draft of that legislation next year, I think, and would be fair to say we're quite hopeful that the government might face up to the challenge facing communities on how to deal with these things from a funding perspective. But we're not holding our breath, and we're moving on anyway. But that doesn't mean to say that if the Act does come out with some opportunities to help lighten the load for our community, that we wouldn't be, as through the Joint Committee, taking advantage of those.
Just through your worship, I mean, do we have? I mean, we've got our own regional group, and they've been meeting, you know, for a long time. But how are we touching and influencing Central? You know, Three Waters with, you know, local government have had a huge influence on how we kind of structured the whole dealio. I'm just not seeing that kind of touch point from local government.
Not sure about local government has been, New Zealand's been doing some work in this area, and so Sullivan, but it's probably, to be fair to say, another level up from dealing with the types of issues that we're now talking about. Our own situation has been heavily examined by Ministry for the Environment. They did a case study on our approach here to look at what are the barriers to effective implementation for adaptation. These very things we're talking about came up strongly through that, and that was fed into the Randerson report, which led to, in part, we like to think, the government taking up the challenge, or the Randerson report recommending the government take up the challenge on that. There have also been a number of meetings from the chair and from the project management of our joint committee to officials in Wellington. And Wellington are very aware of what's going on here, and really sort of, I think you're touching into the space very strongly just by doing what we're doing.
Thank you. I think it's very much work in progress and need to continue on that front, working with central government on coastal issues. So thank you, mover and seconder. No further questions or comments. I'll put those recommendations. All those in favour, please say aye. Any against? Thank you. That's carried. Item number 9, Flaxmere Learn to Swim application to Trust House. Welcome, Kev. This is for an application for funding to Trust House, who's based in Masterton, but the funding comes from Flaxmere for the children of Flaxmere. So this is an application that happens every year. Councillor Dixon.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Just a comment first, followed by a couple of questions. I find it somewhat ironic that the Hastings District Council is applying for funding through a gaming trust when HTC opposed the policy on pokie machines and imparted in sinking lid policy. So 2 questions. Why is the council making the application, and why isn't the application coming from the Flaxmere schools?
Thank you. Who would like to answer? The first question is, why is council making the application? And the second question is, why is it coming from the Flaxmere schools?
I can answer the second question. So each organisation can only apply once, and the Trust House has requested that council puts in the joint application from the school, so it's one application rather than each school using their one opportunity to apply for their swim lessons, whereas council can apply on behalf of the whole group, and the schools have another option to then apply for something else that they need. But the first question, I don't have an answer to.
Can I just ask her another question. If the schools are entitled to make one application, why can't they include their learn to swim costs in their one application they make to Trust House?
So, are they able to group a whole lot of applications together for various uses, or is there they can only use it for sort of sport or swimming or?
They can use the application for whatever they wish, but there is a cap to the application. So I guess this is a way of the school's been able to apply for their capped amount and then another application to help subsidise the learn to swim.
And would you just like to explain, so they've asked the council to apply on their behalf, because that's correct, because they've already they've already applied already and they can't apply a second time?
Yeah, that's correct. Yes.
Right. Councillor Dixon, you satisfied with that response?
I can't support the application, Your Worship, because of that reason. I believe that it's against council policy.
So council policy was a sinking lid policy. That's no more places, wasn't no more applications. It wasn't, so status quo is very much what council voted for, but there's no further new gaming establishments could be established. That's correct, Mr. O'Shaughnessy? Yes.
But it's still council made an application for gaming funding.
Right, thank you. And that doesn't sit well with you? Okay, Councillor Sholem?
Thank you, for Your Worship, and I share my colleagues' concerns. However, I do also look at this and acknowledge that these children are reaping a great deal of benefit from being able to have these classes, and whether or not council applies for these funds on behalf of those schools, that money is still going to be given out to someone, and it may as well be given out to do a great deal of good in our community. It doesn't mean that I support gambling in any way, shape or form, but if the money is there and it can do good in our community, I want to see it doing good in the right parts of our community, so I do support it. And I'm happy to move the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Sholem. Councillor Barber?
Yeah, kia ora. I support Councillor Dixon. These schools just got to get bit more organised. To make sure that they don't. If you're going to do an application, you do the whole application. And yeah, I support the optics around our policy. That we implemented, and 25,000. I'm sure they can find an independent group to find that money. So on ethical grounds, I don't support council leading out on this type of application.
Thank you, Councillor Barber. Just a question. Does council on other areas and aspects apply to gaming trusts for funding for various other activities that we do in the district?
I believe this is the only one that we have live at the moment.
Right.
Yeah, I think this is the only one.
Okay, thank you. But, for the skate park and all those things, we do.
Lotteries.
Lotteries funding, yes. Okay, thank you. Councillor Travis.
If we had voted to abolish gaming machines, then I could actually see Councillor Dixon's point. But given we voted for a sinking lid policy, I don't actually recognise that this is particularly indicative of any form of hypocrisy. And given that the money has been bled out of that community, it is only right that some of it should go back to the kids who are probably in need. And I think we would all see the benefits of Learn to Swim programs, and particularly for that community.
Thank you, Councillor Travis. Councillor Sears.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I agree with Councillor Travers. Although I would like to suggest that we look at this issue actually and develop an agreement going forward on how we'll approach this, given the strong submissions and approach we took on the sinking lid and the discussion from our community about how they felt about the damage from gambling within our community. I think it would be worthwhile for us as a council to look at our approach to all gaming funds, including lotteries. I'm sorry, Mr. Allen, going forward in the future.
Thank you. Councillor Nixon.
Yeah, my comments are very much the same as Councillor Spears. I just feel that, yeah. Oh, sorry. That there's can we avoid us going through this process again and instead get the schools to make a direct request from the game so we don't go through this discussion every year?
Through the chair, if council wishes, this could be the last application that we make to Trust House, but we need to inform the schools and give them plenty of time to, take that on board and write their own applications.
Thank you. I think that we probably need to have a little think about this in future, because I know that there will be activities in the Flaxmere playground and areas that we will apply in the future to Trust House. So while this is around swimming, there will be other areas about playgrounds, and there will be other areas of skate park and where we get funding from for various activities. So I think we'll stick to the recommendations. We've got a mover on the recommendations around this, but you could, in a second, about what you could ask of Councillor Barber before I sort of summarise.
Yeah, I mean,
Wendy's moved. Yeah. And Geraldine seconded. Is that correct? Simon second. Thank you. Sorry, Vicky. Sorry, Baden.
Yeah, I'm hearing what you're saying here, but if I go back to the debate that we had in the chamber, I mean, that was the argument to maintain the status quo, was look at all the funding that we get from the gaming trust, and I argued against it. I said, well, despite the money, it's not about the money, it's about the harm that goes into the community. So that's where my issue is that we're kind of leading an application to go down this path. If you go back to the minutes, I mean, you'll see all the cordial that was given, and I wouldn't want to be supporting something that I actually argued against. So that's my view. I'm pretty sure it was there was quite a few views that were supporting that take only 6 months ago.
Thanks, Councillor Barber. I think that we probably need to bring back a paper on policy direction here. That's what's been raised here. So I think that we'll ask if we put that down as an action, that the team bring back that, because this is in train across the organisation. So while we're talking swimming today, if this is something that council, or direction that council wants to take, then we need to be everybody understanding what a policy direction could look like. Thank you. Councillor Dixon.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. I'm certainly not against the Learn to Swim programs in Flaxmere. Not against those whatsoever, and they're more than entitled to the funding. It's just the process they're using to obtain that funding that I'm objecting to.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. So we have a mover and a seconder. I'll put those recommendations. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against? No. 3 against. We'll record your votes. Councillor Corbin, Councillor Barber and Councillor Dixon. And so we've got an action there, Vicky. That's great. Thank you very much. So that is carried. Thank you. Thank you very much, Kev. Item 10, welcome to Mel. And this will be the last parking control paper that Mel presents. Mel is moving into...
He's already moved.
Oh, he's already moved?
Yep.
Oh, he's got a new role in senior housing. So we've enjoyed your parking control papers, and I'm getting more tickets by the day, I must say. Another 40 come this week. Yep. So, yes, $40. $40, yes, keep getting them. So anyway, just let's have a look here at this item number 10. And Mel, was there anything you'd like to add to your paper?
No, I'll just take orders read. And if you've got any questions, do you think this is the best before you bid? I won't do a better report than this.
Okay, Councillor Watkins.
Happy to move the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Barber, second. Thank you. Any questions or comments, councillors? Councillor Lawson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just one small question. I was just interested to know the time limit of Park 15 outside the Tamata Peak practice in Havelock North. They were happy with 15 minutes?
Yeah, that was recommended by Jeff Whitaker, who's the pharmacist in the area for the vaccination process to go through, yeah.
Right.
Because that's now becoming a COVID vaccination centre.
Right. I suppose I'm just interested in the fact that this will remain though after that vaccination period is over.
He's found that with the post boxes being there, the usage has died down, the usage of the post boxes, and so there's not the call for the P5s anymore.
Okay. Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Have a mover and a seconder. No further questions now. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? Thank you, that's carried, and good luck with your senior housing.
So, thank you.
We're very pleased to have you in that department, Rebecca. Yes. Excellent. Now we've got item 11, so please. The Chief Executive who can explain why we're going into PX.
Two reasons: to protect the commercial negotiating position of council and the privacy of individuals that those negotiations are subject to.
Thank you very much. So, do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Watkins. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? Thank you, that's carried. Now we move on to the PX item. Are we come off live?